attack is back, cause I'm mass destruction. Guess who's here? The bad boys of wrestling. Testing competition, win the war, that's their mission. Not no mercy, see the ring, start the street. If you don't know, you better find out the wolf pack. Here to prove a point, number one, best believe that you don't wanna tussle with them or be involved with them. Come in the ring with them, you're never walking out again. Don't turn your back on the wolf pack. 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 You might wind up in a body bag. You took your chances.
Whoa. What is this version? Let's see where this goes.
Alright. Play the Outsiders theme song.
What up?
Hey yo.
We came in and spray painted
Whoa,
the
what is
titles.
this?
We went here, we no longer your idols. Hollywood, Hulk Hogan and outsiders. Threw the wrestling world into a crisis. For life, shit was never overnight. The bars that I write, they deserve 5 mics. I mean, we had Dennis Rodman, Tyson. Eric Bischoff was a tyrant. The ladder he was climbing.
Eric
Oh, no.
Bischoff. When it comes to
Hold on.
fixing things,
3 seconds of ad. 3 seconds of ad. 3 seconds of ad.
when it comes to
Podcast is going
This
good.
is how they don't get us. Sounds like FTR's music.
This is Outsiders.
Yeah.
So here's what you got to know about WCW. Well, you have to remember WCW. They were the masters of taking an existing song and doing like a Muzak version. And for some reason, the Outsiders, two of the biggest badasses in the history of the company, their music they ripped off. Do you guys recognize what this is?
No, it's called Crazed.
No. It's Crazy by Seal.
Oh my god, that is what it sounds like.
Play Crazy
And
by
you know
Seal.
we're gonna survive. That's so funny. I mean, the biggest one we gotta talk about. This is not relevant. Wow, I never knew that.
You're never gonna survive. That was the
Wow,
Outsiders theme song.
I mean, the biggest example of that is this.
Self high five.
Self high five.
Oh.
I mean,
mean-
it is Teen Spirit. It smells like Teen Spirit. It's like, oh man.
So many
Also,
great
Roman
WCW
Reigns,
songs.
Cry Me a River.
Sure, but it's not as like WCW literally copied the song, changed a note, and we're like, this
Yeah.
is not that song, guys. This is
Yeah.
a different song.
And
And the crazy thing to me is that the Outsiders, one of those guys, maybe it was Scott Hall, but one of those guys must have fucking loved Seal because I don't know how that song matches the vibe of the Outsiders, but
Dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do.
man, welcome to the Comedians Wrestling Podcast. I mean, obviously, we're mourning the death of a great, celebrating the career and life of a legend, an absolute legend, Mr. Scott Hall, who I mean, I'll introduce the room and blah blah blah. But I just want to say that clip I just played is the one everyone's playing, and boy oh boy, does it remind you of an era of wrestling that seems to be just totally gone. Where even in his Hall of Fame speech, he's like, "I'm gonna deliver this in an iconic presentational way. The words will be deliberate." Right? It's like a performer who's like, just so aware of how wrestling works in terms of like having a moment that is iconic and memorable. Like he's trying to create something there. You know, whatever. I fucking love it. I want to say that why I veered and why I was stumbling a bit is because I wanted to say a lot of these wrestlers, they wear like cosplay and you know, they're like, oh, I'm just gonna be derivative of something else. But then the reason I held back on that is because Razor Ramon is wearing essentially a Scarface.
Well, it's a little bit more nuanced than that,
right?
Because if you look at the Razor Ramon character, which is one of the all-time iconic and coolest characters ever, it's not a Scarface cosplay. He's wearing brightly colored vests. He's wearing tons of gold chains. He loves razors. He flicks toothpicks. But the voice, the impression, like that character,
it's the Pacino Scarface.
It's Pacino Scarface. And the story behind that is, you know, when you have your talent meeting and you go into Vince, you could pitch him some characters, or he could pitch you some characters. That's kind of how it goes.
Right.
You know, and Vince had never seen Scarface. So Scott Hall walked in. Scott Hall obviously was a big, hot prospect. He was obviously not in WWE yet or WWF yet, but he was a known entity. He was a big deal out there. And by the way, jacked to the gills. Look up a pre-Razor Ramon Scott Hall.
Huge.
He's a mountain of mass and has a great mustache to boot. But he walked into that Vince pitch meeting just doing a Scarface, just assuming Vince knew what he was doing. And Vince was like, what is that? That's incredible. He's like, that's the character. So it just developed out of a Scarface voice. But the character itself was so much more. He wasn't a coke dealer.
No. I totally. To be honest, like I didn't even. First off, I didn't see Scarface till way later in life.
Right.
After, you know, Razor Ramon when I was a kid, and then I saw Scarface like in college or late high school, you know. So I didn't know that. But even after watching Scarface, it's an example of being influenced by pop culture as opposed to completely like biting it, where you're like, I just wearing a Iron Man costume, which, I mean, it makes me sick even talking about it. We're trying to be positive today.
Right, but we shouldn't even be gumming up the works of this beautiful tribute episode with negativity like that. All we can say is that what started with a white guy doing a Cuban voice, that's what Al Pacino did in Scarface, and that's what Scott Hall did with Razor Ramon, but it was so much more than that. The iconic slick back mullet, the spit curl down the middle, a la John Travolta in Grease, the toothpicks, the oozing machismo, the Chico, everything was an original. It was all influenced by other things, but it came together, a gestalt, if you will, and there was nothing like it. So I view this as an original character that was just influenced by a lot of different things.
Absolutely. By the way, welcome to the Comedians of Wrestling podcast. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Comedians of Wrestling. Come see our live show Thursday, March 31st in Dallas. We're doing DZ Does Dallas, baby. Me and Dolph Ziggler put on a show. Tulo will be in the mix. Who's here? Nick Tulo in the house. You can get our tickets at Eventbrite. The link is it links in the you can see it's in Ziggler's bio on Instagram. I just want to make sure I plug this before we get into all the conversations because I'll totally forget. But yeah, you check out Eventbrite. DZ Does Dallas. Did he post the flyer? Where's the flyer at? Hold on. Give me one sec. Because I had to shorten the fucking URL. You know how this shit works. Technology, baby. So dzdoesdallas.eventbrite.com. Get tickets right now. They're selling pretty fast. It's part of the collective, the GCW collective, the show. So it'll be right across the hall from Bloodsport, right across the hall, right after Bloodsport, and right before Joey Janela's spring break. So if you're going to GCW, you're going to those events Thursday night, we're part of that. We'll make you laugh for a little bit, and you'll go back. Okay? Cool. Get that. Patreon.com/Comedians Wrestling. Get access to our bonus episodes. We give you one every week. We're having a good time. Nick Tulo in the house, the Supermarket at Tiptoe with Tulo. And you already heard from former Cow Champion, Hawaii's own, Mr. Jason Shamiro. Yes. So Scott Hall
Mahalo, bro.
Passed away. Scott Hall, 63 years old. Truly one of the greats. I always say I suck at these episodes, you know. I suck at giving tribute to wrestlers because I'm not going to do them justice, you know. And I'll want to talk about the current product because that's what we do. We have fun talking about professional wrestling, but we got to take a step back for someone this iconic in wrestling and one of the few guys. And like, I'm not saying that he was Scott Hall, not one of my guys in the same way he is for Shebs. You know, that's one of the beauty of wrestling. But Scott Hall is in that short list of wrestlers who are like the reason that I like wrestling. You know, like I only like wrestling because of these like 10 guys, and he's one of them. You know what I mean? That the NWO guys, the DX guys. You know what I mean? And Stone Cold, The Rock, the people who made wrestling. It was an era where these guys were larger than life, truly, and cool as fuck. And Scott Hall might be the coolest of all of them.
He's maybe the coolest guy. He was the coolest dude.
Right.
I learned, unfortunately for everyone, I'm very cool, and I learned 90% of what it is, what it means to be a cool guy from watching Razor Ramon and then Scott Hall in the NWO.
Well, let me frame this, and Chebs, I'm gonna let you go because this is truly so I'll put it into perspective for you. These are huge men. But I'll put this into perspective for you is that like me and Chebs, we grew up together. I grew up with all these guys, as a matter of fact, Tulo and Chebs. Scott Hall was your go-to wrestler. Like when I heard Scott Hall died, the first guy I think of is Chebs. You know,
and you know what? I got a couple DMs from people,
right,
being like, "Yo, as soon as I heard the news, I thought of you immediately." And I was like, "Hey, thanks for reaching out. It's been a tough 48 hours. It's been a tough 24 hours."
And that sparked a conversation with Chebs we'll get into in a second, but the way you spoke about Scott, once you say it, then I'll chime in. But I'll just let you take the reins on why was Scott Hall, and on the show for newer listeners, we talk about wrestlers being one of my guys, right? It just that's part of the thing with wrestling, right? It's like, why do you connect with a superhero or a wrestler or whatever? Like, why do you personally connect with someone? And it's not just about like the writing, them being over. It's just like, man, I really appreciate the work, or I see something in them that something about me, like whatever reason you connect to them, But your ultimate guy was Scott Hall, And so I just want to know why. What is it about Scott Hall that really clicked for you always?
Well, here's if we want it begins and ends with one key factor. Okay.
Yeah.
And that is that in that era of wrestling, it was buff bodies. They were oiled up, but they were all smooth chested, at least like 95% of them smooth chested.
Right.
And Scott Hall was running around town, chest hair to the gods, baby. He was fully haired up. And I would look at that and be like, oh, that's like my family. Like my dad's super hairy. I now am a super hairy guy. When I was 7, I thank God I didn't have chest hair yet. But he was an example of you could still be the coolest guy in the room and be covered in body hair. It's like, I love it. This is my guy right here. That's where it began, if I had to be perfectly honest. All right. I also loved The Undertaker when I was a kid because I had spooky boy tendencies, But what I always understood is that this guy, this Razor Ramon guy, is actually the coolest dude I've ever seen. He's who I want to be. I don't want to be The Undertaker. In my heart, I was like, I think I might be a little bit of The Undertaker inside. I have a lot of pain, but it's like, that's not who I want to be. I want to be Scott Hall. I want to be throwing toothpicks in people's faces. I want to be partying with chicks and driving in convertibles. It was like, look, it's that classic wrestling cocky heel character, right? Like, too cool for school, too good for the room. Ric Flair obviously made it wildly popular, but Scott Hall had this little spin on it where he also just didn't give a shit. Like, he couldn't care less. That's what coolness is all about. It's nonchalantness. It's the way he moved, the way he acted. Like, he was like, yeah, whatever, man. Let me ask you a question. Are we allowed to play vignettes on this podcast? Because the Razor Ramon vignettes are
videos.
Yeah, like the vignettes that would introduce the character.
It just
They're
makes
so
it get
good.
taken down. We more just talk about them.
Well, I wish I watched them. I didn't actually get a chance to. I should have done some prep for this podcast.
They took down the full Rexecution video. We were rating RKOs. They're just like, no, we're not having that.
Well, I'm gonna at some point I might play them just in my headphones and just tell you what's going on, because I forgot like a lot of the quotes and a lot of the stuff he would say. But the things that would come out of this guy's mouth were so just funny and cool. Also in the 90s, like, big colors, big patterns were happening. So like, people associate Scott Hall, Razor Ramon with like gold and purple, right? That was great. But he would color code the bikini brief to the entrance vest in like a satin finish. Right. So purple is the classic, but there's a blue, there's a yellow, there's a green that was very popular. There was one with some sort of like funky, almost like in living color-esque 90s, vaguely Kwanzaa celebratory print that's very popular. He just, everything from soup to nuts was working. The character, the what he was saying, the outfits, and then you have to understand that he had a finisher that nobody was doing. It was so goddamn cool. The Razor's Edge, the Outsider's Edge, whatever you want to call it. Like, you see that move and you go, that's a finisher, pal. That's not some sort of Dean Ambrose DDT situation. All right. This isn't like a knee jump. This guy is power bombing you, but before he throws you, he lifts you over his head, crucifix style. It's so good. It's epic. It's an epic move.
It's a move
and
you
that's
don't
great.
see anymore. Every once in a while, a wrestler's like busted out for a second, right? Like Lance Archer / Damian Priest.
Damian Priest does it. He does something.
They both kind of do it.
They both kind of do it, but they kind of don't. They don't do it all the time. You know.
Well, Lance Archer's is stupid. Lance Archer's is
he flips you on
the
your
black
face.
because that's the bad. It's a wrong impact. It doesn't look good. But Damian Priest, the artist formerly known as Punishment Martinez, he does some sort of variations. I think he does like a sit down, right? He does something to it.
But none of these guys have the ball. The only guy who had the only guy who out razor edged razor was I think Mike Awesome and like ECW, like during the crazy ECW years, was like throwing Spike Dudley from like the top rope to the outside.
Yeah, but look, pal, if you give an artist like Scott Hall, Spike Dudley to throw around, he'll make that look good too. I posted a clip of Scott Hall, older Scott Hall. This is NWO in WWE Scott Hall giving a Razor's Edge to The Rock. That's a big man. That's a big guy to do that move to.
Yeah.
Well, all ego Ethan Page has the ego's edge, which is
yes, that's what I was thinking of.
Well, but you know what? But here's another thing that's so iconic about Scott Hall. That move now is whatever you are, blank edge, right? Like that. The crucifix powerbomb is now forever associated with Razor Ramon, with Scott Hall. If you do one, you're putting your twist on it, and it's that blank's edge. So it's the ego's edge. You know, like if I did it, if I could do it, I would call it the Aloha Edge, right? Like it's just now a crucifix powerbomb is an edge-based move in the naming convention, and that's because that's like getting your jersey retired or your number retired in wrestling. If whoever does that move has to reference your name for it, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
and I do want to talk about, and you tell me if it's time, but I want to talk about the legacy of Scott Hall and so the accomplishments of Scott Hall, or we could keep talking about how cool he was.
No, let's talk about the accomplishments. I wanted to talk about. I have two things to say that I think are both in the cool category.
I like this cool
about
talk.
The accomplishments, because accomplishments we should talk about, because I think people a lot of times focus on the lack of accomplishment of Scott Hall.
Well, but that's what I want to. That's what I want to get into.
Right, but which we get into. But I want to say two things, and this goes back to my point originally about how he was like a actual performer, right, and had like a control in a way that I fucking dig.
Yeah.
And then I'll even tie that into when we talk about current product for a second later. But is the catchphrase, "Hey yo," okay?
Oh my God.
And not just that. Oh, I have a catchphrase. The delivery and the timing of it, you know, where he would make you wait for it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Was so fucking iconic. You know, it was so. It would silence a crowd, right? Like now I feel like the crowd runs rampant over these performers, or they're dead silent, which we could talk about. And now WWE has just resorted to complete fake audio, right? Which is in a while. But you would sit there and wait for him to do it, you know? Like, hey, yo. It was fucking great. And even the KO tried to throw a hey yo in at the beginning of his promo this week on Raw, right? That's how he opened up. And I was like, and he even did it. I was like, it showed you how much the performance and the voice and how all of it just worked, you know? It's to the point where if you watch Roman do Acknowledge Me, he's like almost trying to capture some of that, and it's not. It does not click in that same way. As much as I like Acknowledge Me and Roman's in his best zone, he does not have the fucking X factor that a guy like Scott Hall had. You know, how he would command it.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, what that boils down to is the number one most important thing you could have in wrestling, which is just charisma.
And he's
Scott Hall
and machismo.
And he was oozing it. Well, yeah, it's machismo and charisma, and he had a machismo charisma sandwich.
So here's the next thing I want to say. To me, the most iconic Razor moment. I mean, besides like this is where the big boys play, but you always think of Kevin's line there, so it kind of annoys me. Just showing up on WCW, like that was fucking awesome, you know?
Yeah.
And just being a part about that and being big enough to really like shake the whole thing. There's a great, whatever. I don't know what it's called. But something on the network. It's really good about this. But is WrestleMania 10, okay? The going under through the ladder moment.
Amazing.
Right? Where it's like Shawn comes out first, walks around the ladder like, yo, walking around the ladder like, yo, that's bad luck. I'm not going to do that. And then, like, what makes him, like, the small moments that make the character is where like, he just goes right underneath it.
Yep.
Right? With his walk with the toothpick in his mouth.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't give a fuck.
No.
That's what cool is. What cool is being a badass, being a bad guy, and you don't give a fuck about anything.
So it's just when you think about wrestlers today, you're like, do they even have like those the subtleties and the nuance? And it's kind of like my beef with all the fucking cosplays because they're not. If you're not making a character, you can't do it. Because as short as ever, all these guys want to shit on a wrestler like a Braun Strowman, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And like he probably deserves it. Adam Scherr is probably a jabroni and a half. Doesn't seem like a guy I want to have a beer with, right? He doesn't pass the have a beer with test. But it felt like a guy like that was like able to say get these hands because he was trying to click into a character and find it. You know what I mean? And I think Scott Hall is just one of the dudes who like found that perfect blend, that work shoot blend of character and the guy matching with the character.
Well, that's the thing. It's the Vince Vaughn modality, right? Like, is he a great actor or is he just really great at being Vince Vaughn? And the thing about Scott Hall is, you know, there's all this nuance to the character, there's all these cool moves the character does. Is he thinking about them in advance, or is that just what comes out of him naturally? Because he's just like this cool kind of bad dude, you know? I think it's got to be a little bit of both.
When you said Vince Vaughn, all I think about is how in the movie Fighting With My Family, he goes, hey, this is the NXT. All right? This is the big leagues. He calls NXT the NXT, and like no one corrected him. Like no one on set was like, let's just take that back, but this time just say this is NXT. Don't say the NXT.
Look, you know how the biz works. Maybe they did a few takes like that, but this was still the best take. And they're like, whatever. We're done with it. But yes.
Well, no, because it's funny. This is a total veer, Mahan.
Sure.
This is a total veer, Mahan. He's going. But his name's Veer, and he's veered off.
Incredible.
Is that like, it is so funny. Like, Steve Merchant's not a wrestling fan, but if you remember, Dallas, Texas, he was front row because he was working on Fighting With My Family.
My family, yeah.
Right? And so he was so immersed in pro wrestling as much as possible, and he made a really fine film. Like, Fighting With My Family is a really fine wrestling film. But if you're not a wrestling fan, you cannot fake it. And that's like, something will slip through the cracks. Like, wrestling is too nuanced, and like, you cannot, it does not matter how much research you do. Like, you will call it the NXT. Like, something will slip, and I will smell the phoniness, you know? You don't need to call SummerSlam the Summerfest. Like, fucking Jeremy Piven. But anyway, oh man, I'm sorry. But you're saying, like, Vince Vaughn, it was that modality. You were making all those points about Scott.
My point was that Scott Hall was very much like the Razor Ramon character.
Yeah.
And it's not just that we're saying, yo, maybe I don't know how hard he had to work to make that character so great. I think it was just his natural reactions, the natural way he would walk through. Like, it just came easy to him. He made it look effortless. That's, I think, what I'm trying to say. He made acting cool and being a badass look effortless. And that made it even cooler.
I would say for Scott Hall, for me, I think he was the first real wrestler that I was like a fan of. You know, like we all loved Warrior and Hogan. You know, those were the people that they like forced us to like. We had to eat our vitamins, say our prayers, fucking drink milk because of these motherfuckers. But then this guy comes along, and he made it cool to like a bad guy. Like, that was the first bad like guy wrestler that I think I ever liked, and that's crazy for a young kid to think of, you know. And like, it was the true transitional part for a new era of fans that you can actually like a bad guy. You know, it's just I have wrestling figures. It was the one that I always look forward to. Like Razor Ramon was the greatest, and it was like then Shawn Michaels came and HBK and the two of them together made wrestling spectacular, and having that rivalry and having the ladder matches. It was just such a cool era of wrestlers. They were unlike, the two of them together were unlike anything.
Yeah.
And then NWO, like, I mean, this guy was so good that they made a fake version of him. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like fake Razor, fake Diesel. Like that was a thing that existed because of how good these guys were and how in demand it was. It made sense to make a copy of them and do that, you know? So it's like, it's just NWO was the coolest. I mean, I have the Too Sweet fucking hand gesture tattooed on my ankle.
Oh, hell
because,
You know, you're making me real. Sorry, Tulo. You just made me think of something. You just made me think about why I come down so hard on like Adam Cole and Undisputed Era. You know, I think they're just not cool like the guys. Like they're doing a version of that shit. You know what I mean? But they're not cool like those guys were. You know,
but how can you be as cool as those guys? Those guys were the. Here's the thing: what it boils down to is that Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, both of them, are two of the coolest fucking dudes ever. They're certainly two of the coolest wrestlers ever. The NWO was founded with Hulk Hogan, who I will say is not that cool of a dude. I will go on record as saying that, but he's Hulk Hogan. So it's like
they more use the idea of him,
right? I'm saying, but he's such a big deal. And now you're going to compare, like maybe the biggest wrestler, arguably the biggest wrestler of all time, with two of the coolest dudes that ever walked the face of God's green earth, and you're going to compare them to three dudes that if you stacked them on top of each other, they wouldn't even be as big as Kevin Nash.
Yeah,
and they're not as good as these other guys. Like you can't. It's just not. It's not the same. And to your cosplay point, look, I love that Bullet Club does Too Sweet. I love that the Elite does Too Sweet. That's such a great and fitting tribute. We should talk about that too, because I talked about how, you know, now the Razor's Edge, anyone who has a crucifix powerbomb, it is now the Edge move. Similarly, that Too Sweet hand gesture, that's just like an official cool wrestling stable hand gesture. And again, that was NWO. That was popularized by those guys and the Clique before that, right? So the legacy that these guys had, the impact that these guys had is so far reaching that you can't. That's part of Scott Hall's legacy. It's like how much impact he had on the business.
Hey yo.
Anyway, I do want to mention. We should start getting into maybe some of these accomplishments.
Do it up.
Because you defined it as maybe a lack of accomplishment.
Well, I think that's how people talk about him, but I think that's a testament to how high people see him.
Well, here's what I'll say. Okay, I'll say a couple things. Well, first, I'm going to say one more thing that bridges the gap between an accomplishment and being a cool guy. Okay, and that is I'm going to read a Stephanie McMahon quote about him. Okay, and she said that WWE has sent, and this was when he was still drugging and pilling and not in great shape, like maybe 10 years ago plus. She said that they'd sent him to rehab multiple times, spent in the six figures on him alone to get sober. And she said, it's the most amount of money we've ever spent on anyone. And she said,
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at that. It's just such a.
But I'm saying that's how fucking cool this guy was. And that's how, I mean, that he was like, yo, WWE spent more money on trying to get this guy sober and rehab than any other wrestler ever. And she said he was an incredibly talented performer, larger than life, charismatic, and he means a lot to a lot of people. And that's how much they wanted to protect him and get him better. Ultimately, it was some combination of rehab, getting sober, and DDP yoga.
DDP yoga.
And DDP and Dom Down's Faith that kind of got him out of that rut. And we got like 10 more great years out of Scott Hall.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, there was that E60, that ESPN documentary on him, and I was almost in tears. He was in shambles, man. Like it looked like he was on his last legs over 10 years ago. And it was just so on painkillers, anxiety medication, like he was fucked up. Yeah. So, you know, shout out to DDP for and I guess to the McMahons for trying to get him in rehab and stuff like that. But so these accomplishments, I always talk about that era of wrestling in the 90s. Not everyone got to be the world champ, right? Not everyone got to have the strap. It was, people held that shit for years, you know, and if they were today, like Dean Ambrose in WWE, like forget John Moxley in AEW because he's obviously much better. Dean Ambrose in WWE in the 90s probably would not have had the strap ever. Jeff Hardy probably would not have ever had the strap ever. Think about all the legends who did not hold the World Wrestling Federation title. Jake the Snake, Roddy Piper, the list goes on. It's just the people that you would think that should. And Razor Ramon is one of those people. You're like, yo, it's crazy he didn't become world champion at some point. He was more in the IC realm, right? He was like an IC forward guy. And obviously probably his most famous match in WWE was WrestleMania 10 against Shawn Michaels. It's known as one of the best ladder matches in the history of the genre. And it's a fucking incredible match. One of my personal favorite matches of all time. And the thing is, not everyone got a turn being at the top of that mountain.
Right.
And so he didn't. And I think if the Razor Ramon character was in the climate today,
right,
the level of popularity he had,
right,
he absolutely would have been world heavyweight champion at some point.
Well,
now,
yeah, totally. I think that was just all on him.
No, well, yes and no, but Mr. Perfect never had the strap. Like, there's not all your favorite guys didn't get to be champion back then.
Yeah. But Scott Hall was full on championship material.
You don't think Roddy Piper was?
No, yes, he totally was, and that's a great point. Piper's probably the perfect guy to point out. But I would say Scott Hall, forget about a WWE title, he should have been the WCW champion at least. I mean,
right.
He literally, Arquette, who, by the way, I was just messaging with David Arquette.
Nice.
Fucking great guy, okay?
Great guy.
That's more of just like a joke, but he when he was, how over the NWO was and blah blah blah. Him and Hall probably should have had some feud there too, or right? Like, I mean, that was just all. My point is that, like, yes, you can point to his WWE years and say he was a consummate Intercontinental Champion zone guy, right? But when in WCW he was moved up to heavyweight, just from that move, they made such an impact. If he was sober and got his shit together and they trusted to put it on him, he definitely would have been the champion.
Well, that's what
right?
it boils down to, right? When you're talking about the NWO, core NWO,
right.
Nash, Hall, Hogan, Outsiders and Hogan, you're having Kevin Nash lay down to give the strap to Hulk Hogan, right? So in a world where Kevin Nash is your champ, Hulk Hogan is your champ, Scott Hall's always just going to be the third fiddle to that. Like, who's laid that? It's just, for it to get from A to B to C, it's like he was just the last guy on that chain, unfortunately, right? Yeah. So it's not the easiest thing to just give him the title unless he has some sort of major face turn or some big angle or whatever, which, again, the company wouldn't always do.
Remember, look what happened with, like, Rollins in the Shield. He was the jabroni of the Shield,
For sure. Look, again, all I'm saying
also
is...
He's 6'6", huge guy.
He's huge. You're absolutely right. Look, at the end of the day, if he lived the wrestler life, right? And that meant he said, and he has a great quote also. He goes, I'll give you another great Razor Ramon quote, okay? Yeah. He goes, I tell my kids this. I can't tell you not to drink and do drugs. They are fun. It's fun. They work. That's what he said about drinking and drugs, right? They work.
Yeah.
But what sucks is when you want to quit and you can't, and pretty soon you alienate or you hurt everyone around you. It's a family disease, and then you can't keep a promise to anybody. What sucks the most is when you can't even keep a promise to yourself. So that's where he was at. He was known as one of the biggest partiers in that era where all these guys were partying all the goddamn time. You know what it used to be like? You'd go after the show, everyone's at the hotel bar and they're raising hell. Now after the shows, these guys are up in their room fucking catching Pokemon on their Nintendo DS or whatever. It's a different climate. It's a different climate. And on some level he was
Adam Cole's playing fucking Forbidden or whatever the fuck.
Whatever they're doing. And look, it's better because these days
he's playing Halo. He's the master queef.
He's the Master Chief. But these guys now, look, everything is different now. Back then wrestling was its own universe and its own culture. It still is. But now these guys are like any other athlete where they go, look, my body is my livelihood. I need to take better care of myself. I need to, the better I eat, the less I party, like the more I'm gonna be able to do this and go to the higher level and last longer. So, but that type of consideration did not exist in Razor Ramon's wrestling business. No. It was just fucking, let's fucking go. That's what it was. And he did it, man. And he went. So here's when the legacy, look, you could say, well, he never was the world heavyweight champion. And that is true. And maybe it's because the culture not everyone had the belt, but a lot of it is certainly because he definitely partied first and foremost, right? That was what it was all about.
Yeah.
But the legacy of this guy is that he changed the business twice. On 2 times I can point to this guy absolutely changed the wrestling business on its face. One, we're going to say, and they're very close in time, but I still want to point to both of them. The curtain call at MSG House Show, where the whole clique,
right,
when Diesel and Razor Ramon were leaving WWF, there was a house show which was not televised, so it wasn't that big of a deal.
Like MSG, right?
It was an MSG, the curtain call. It was a tag match between 2 bad guys, which I believe would be Razor Ramon and Triple H, against 2 good guys, Shawn Michaels and Diesel. That I believe was the tag match, and I believe
Triple
it was
H
in a
at
cage.
that point was Hunter Hearst Helmsley, right?
Right, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the Connecticut Blue Blood, and they were all homies. They were homies with X-Pac, and Diesel and Razor Ramon were leaving.
Yeah,
and this is the last match they were ever going to wrestle together. Last time these 4 guys would be in that ring together, and they said, "Look, to hell with the middle class." That's a quote actually from a Warzone video game. Creative player, the governor. Anyway, they said, "To hell with the middle class." But they said, "To hell with protocol." We're saying goodbye to each other in that ring. That's what we're doing. We're having a moment. So even though they shouldn't have broke that 4th wall, and it wasn't really broken back then, like if you were a heel, you were not friends with the faces, right? And obviously, you know, there's that story of Sheik and Hacksaw getting pulled over with cocaine, and people are like, what the hell is this? I thought they're supposed to be enemies. But the clique doing that curtain call in front of a whole house of people, a packed MSG, where good guys and bad guys hugged in the middle of the squared circle after their match, said their goodbyes. That's an iconic moment in wrestling. And that is the beginning, or not the beginning, but that is a concrete moment we can point to where the paradigm shifted from, hey, this is fake. We're cool to tell you this is fake.
Yeah.
And now we can move on to what this product became. So that's an iconic moment. That's a time he changed the business. And then the NWO itself, the formation of that faction absolutely set the tone for wrestling to this day, right? The influx of major heel stables that got over and became face stables started with the NWO. That is one of the big, and if you watch the Bash of the Beach where Hogan joins up with those guys, the crowd is going insane. They are mental. They're losing their minds. They're throwing bottles and trash at these guys for half an hour. And not only did it change creative, right? Like it set the tone for DX, every other stable. It set the tone for the entire rest of the 90s and the entire rest of the 2000s. You know, even groups like the Shield, obviously the Elite, can all point to the NWO as a major influence. But also, this changed the game as far as talent having sort of a bargaining chip as far as salary and shit goes.
Yeah, so that I knew about from that episode I watched. There's a Shawn Nash episode, something on the network. I mean, good luck trying to find it on fucking Peacock.
Right.
If you've even tried to find a WrestleMania on Peacock, it's impossible, you know?
There's also a podcast that covers it, like it retells that whole entire story, like the growth of the rivalry between WWE and WCW and how it all came about. And they tell the story, the contracts, like with Nash and Scott Hall, how Scott Hall was leaving. He's like recruited Nash because he's like, yo, they're going to pay us all this money and travel half the amount. Like, let's just do this. And then
it changed the game.
It
changed it absolutely changed the game. And then it became, now the product got interesting because now the wrestlers have some reasons to stay or go. It just changed everything. They said, and Kevin Nash has obviously a beautiful post on Instagram about Scott Hall from a couple days ago before Scott Hall passed. I don't know if we need to read the whole thing, but you definitely should check it out if you hadn't. But he said that we changed wrestling both in content and pay for those a lot that disliked us. Right. So people maybe didn't like these guys because they ran the dressing room and they were cocky and they did what they wanted. But whether they liked them or not, what they did helped all these guys get bigger paydays.
Yeah.
And that's a huge blessing for the business. So this guy changed the business many times over. You also want to talk about like on-screen legacy too. So again, his legacy, his impact is undeniable. But things that he's done, obviously the WrestleMania 10 ladder match, but also he is the man responsible for ending Goldberg's streak in WCW too. He hit him with the stun gun.
The
stun gunned him. What?
It was the cattle prod.
Whatever you want to call it, he stuns
because
this
he had the long count. I remember that so. Like
Starcade '98.
I remember
Goldberg
watching
undefeated.
live Starcade '98. Like I was so, because you knew Goldberg was gonna lose. Like it just felt like the match he was gonna lose. And I remember all I remember about it is was watching it and just being like disappointed in the jackhammer that Nash gave him after the stun.
The jackknife.
The jackknife. The jackknife that he gives. Sorry, I forgot which jack I was talking about. The knife or the hammer. And I remember him giving it to him and I'm being like, man, you're ruining. This is the end of Goldberg's streak, man. Like, don't botch the fucking jackknife.
Well, WCW was definitely known for a lot
Nash was a botcher. So
well, even the jackknife powerbomb as a move is sort of a lazy, botchy powerbomb. You know, you guys just lift you up and
quick release kind of, right?
Yeah, it's not the most, again, so this is one of the reasons I always love that Razor's Edge, because even a cool finisher like the jackknife powerbomb, it's not that fucking cool. The Razor's Edge is a finisher's finisher.
But I appreciate the variant aspect of it. You know,
love the variant. But then look at like what Wardlow's doing with the Powerbomb Symphony right now.
Yeah,
that is beautiful.
Well, he hits you with a 2, right?
He hits you with 3.
Oh,
he hits you with 1, then he dances around, then he gives you a double.
Right,
it's always in 3. But the way he does it, he power bombs you, and then he takes your leg and he sort of pushes it forward, so you somersault backwards. He sticks it right back in. I'm saying that's masterful powerbomb variance right there. But to your point, any powerbomb variance is a good thing. Even Batista's silly little sit down powerbomb with the back roll at the end.
Okay, but so like, but I just want to say this: bring up a guy like Wardlow, right? Who's probably right now like the equivalent kind of guy to that big guy, handsome guy, jacked guy, whatever, the guy in that zone.
Doesn't have the charisma of Nash and Hall,
you can even put Roman in there.
Roman and Wardlow are way more together.
Could just stand there with the mic and say, like, just his presence.
Yeah.
Was like, oh, like he was bouncing. He'd look at you and be like, wow, look at this guy. And like, if you really put that into perspective, I'm talking about that X Factor, and you really think about guys like Roman today, like Roman looks like he has the equivalent look of a Scott Hall, I would say. Okay.
Yeah, he looks as cool as Scott Hall looks.
Okay, cool. So we agree. Like he has the equivalent cool guy look. Like when I'm looking at the poster for Mania this year, Roman looks fucking amazing on it. Like that Clash poster, he looks amazing. But if you see Roman in lifetime video, right, for even 1 second, you smell that he's missing something. Just from standing there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when he speaks, it's like, fine, we'll accept it, but you are lowering your expectations. You know, you are lowering it a little bit. I think that, and guys like Scott Hall, you didn't even have to do that. Like you didn't have to do it. You didn't have to compromise because the talents they don't know how to command you like a real actor. You know,
right? Well, we didn't really probably know how good we had it with Razor Ramon and Scott Hall, and a lot of because I don't think we knew all this when we were kids. We just knew we liked him, and we weren't sure why. But if you look at his the way he talks and, his sort of like the instrument of his voice and stuff like that, and a lot of the promos, they might not be so memorable. He's not Dusty Rhodes, right? He's not cutting even John Cena promos. That's not what Scott Hall's doing. There's something else. It is just this untouchable coolness. It's just his swag.
Yes, and that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about quality of promo. He doesn't
right. It's
have
not
any,
that. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's not that.
If we're talking about Mach or something, we'd be like, oh, the cream of the crop. Like we're not talking about like specific moments like that. I'm just talking about energy and presence.
It's just he has a natural performer's instincts.
Yeah.
And again, it's the way he walks with his hands out, crouched, the way he would do like, oh, I'm so scared, and put his fingers under his chin, ooh, like that whole thing.
Yeah.
The way he would point to his partner, boom, 2 hands over the head, arch over. Like everything he did looked smooth, looked fluid, looked cool. He just was a cool guy. You couldn't teach it, you couldn't fake it, you couldn't learn it. You can't even describe it properly. But the thing about Roman Reigns is when he's walking to that ring slowly, methodically, it looks cool. It does. When he's pausing before he's asked people to acknowledge him, it looks cool. But the thing is this, the difference is that he's trying to do that.
Yeah, it's not natural. It's not natural.
He's doing a great job with it. but you could tell that's what he is thinking about doing. He's like, look, I'm going to do this cool thing now. And with Scott Hall, he made it look effortless because it probably was. He was just that cool of a guy.
I'll put it into perspective. Like I was saying last week, and let's bring it to wrestling modern. CM Punk was cutting a promo on MJF like maybe the week before, maybe the in the go home show, right? And like CM Punk I was so engaged in it, and it was so real, right? That like when he had to go start talking about wrestling shit, right? Like kayfabe stuff.
Right. How he's going to win in the ring.
Like it reminded me I'm watching wrestling when he was like, I fucking threw the ashes of Undertaker. And you're like, all right, wait, let's take a step back. Like, these weren't actually Paul Bearer's ashes that you threw at Undertaker.
He's talking about, hey, man, I used to be like you. I was an angry kid. I did some bad things I'm not proud of. And he lists like storyline kayfabe heel shit he did. Yeah. It was amazing.
Yeah. And like, by the way, when I do get that bonk on the head of like, oh, it's wrestling shit, I love it. Like I love the I love the word you say, like the modality. Like, you know what I mean? Like I love that. I love that. But I'm not getting that from fucking Roman, you know?
No.
You're always in like whatever the zone that Roman is in, you know?
No.
But anyway, any last words you want to say about Scott Hall? Shabs, I'll give it to you. And Tulo, if you have anything as well, I feel like I said my piece on a great talent, you know.
I mean,
and honestly, I feel proud that I rocked like in Vegas that I went with Scott Hall trunks, you know. I mean, like it is something to point out that like, you know, I did think of in the few trunks I've had made in my time, you know. To think that I was like, oh, I want that Scott Hall WrestleMania 18 look, you know?
I mean, Newman got to play Scott Hall in the creation of
the Cow title video,
the original Cow title. Yeah,
absolutely. So Scott Hall has been iconic to this podcast, and many would say what is called in modern times, I believe it's called an influencer.
I mean, simple enough. Like he was just the man. It was plain and simple. That's the best way to put it. I can't tell you how many times we tried to give each other razor's edges onto like beds, like hotel beds. If you got to a hotel room when you were like 10 years old, 11 years old, you were giving, I mean, I had two older brothers. My brothers, like, we literally reenacted Razor Ramon stuff all the time. Toothpicks in the face, turns into razor's edges onto the couch, like onto the beds, like just my first wrestler that I was a fan of. It's plain and simple, and it's so dope. Like, and it sucks like that he's gone, but at the same time, like you see the impact he's had over all these wrestlers. So many wrestlers were like, I'll tell you about this time I went out to him and he said nothing but cool shit and like gave me the approval to use the gimmick or use the words or use the gesture or use the move. Like he just said yes to all of it. Because in reality, when you keep seeing it over and over again, you get reminded of how great he is. So it's so smart in his part. He's like, I'm just going to live forever in this wrestling industry because I was that good of a wrestler that people want to continue to emulate me and be me. They'll never be able to pull it off, you know? But yeah, sure. Pay homage to me, please, you know?
No, whatever happened to Scott Hall? Scott Hall's son was trying to be a wrestler. Is he still a wrestler? Or what happened?
Cody Hall, the second most famous son of a wrestler named Cody, is wrestling as far as I know. Yeah. He's in New Japan, and he was like semi a Bullet Club guy. He was sort of like their young boy. He was like getting into Bullet Club last I checked, but I don't know if he's still wrestling or what. I imagine he would be, right?
I imagine too, but I never really, you know, I thought by now, I don't know, whatever.
Right. I mean, if he was onto something here, we probably would have seen him. He's 30 years old right now, so we don't know. Last thing in his Wikipedia is he was NJPW till 2017, Pro Wrestling Noah till 2019, then DDT Pro Wrestling, which was also Japanese, and then he was in Major League Wrestling, but he had been released after one day of being on contract. In December 4th, 2020. So that is pushing over a year and change at this point. So I really don't know where Cody Hall is. We might hear from him or see him in the coming days, weeks, months. Who knows? I don't really know much about him other than that, you know, his dad is fucking not just one of my guys, but one of my original guys, like one of the original one of my guys, and one of my main guys. Like when I'm putting together my Mount Rushmore, personal Mount Rushmore, not who I think the best wrestlers of all time are, right? It's easy to come up with your Mount Rushmore for like who are the all-time greats. It's, you know, some permutation of Flair, Hogan, Rock, and Stone Cold, right? But when I'm doing my personal Mount Rushmore, who my favorites ever, Scott Hall is always there. Locked and loaded, ready to go. Don't even have to think about it. Scott Hall, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time.
Okay, Scott Hall. A couple things about Scott Hall.
Nice.
Build is 6'7".
He probably was. Tulo's got the Scott Hall, the Razor Ramon figures right now, where he's showing the people.
Oh, I see that. And then
Fantastic.
also, do you see this? He was married to a woman from 1990. They got divorced in 98.
Okay.
Then they got remarried in 99, and they got divorced in 2001.
That's the, well, you know what that is. That's just a guy who's an alcoholic. That's just like,
Right.
hey, I'm divorcing you unless you get your shit together. And then he didn't. They got divorced, and he did, and then they got together, and then he didn't, and they got divorced again. That seems like I think remarrying your ex is a standard operating procedure in the world of substance abuse recovery.
Right, because you're like actually I didn't think of it like that, because like if the only thing wrong is the demon of the
right
and then if you have that under control, you're like, I'd like to be married to you.
Right.
I didn't think about that. Interesting.
Right. He's my thoughts on Scott Hall are thus: he's one of my main favorite wrestlers ever. He taught me how to be cool. I look at his career and I see a guy who changed this business, has an indelible impact on this business. When I think wrestling, will always think Scott Hall. And you know what? I can't think of another wrestler who would have this impact on me passing. Like when I think of the guys who are like, wow, this really hurt. It feels like someone close to me is gone. It's maybe him, maybe Mick Foley. Like he is close to me in a way that I almost reserve for my family. And there's a reason why people like Drake will wear a Razor Ramon t-shirt if they have to rock wrestling. Tulo's wearing it right now. There's a reason why Razor Ramon can transcend into the mainstream, because you see this guy move and breathe and operate, and you see him be who he be, and you can't deny it. The guy just fucking ruled.
Hey yo.
Yeah.
Hey yo.
All right. Well, let's kind of move on here. I mean, you know, for the best that we can. Obviously, if this comes back up, it comes back up. But I do just want to speak about.
I do just want to speak.
I do just want to speak about.
Sorry, I gotta say one thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I might get a razor blade tattoo on me. At some point. I'm probably gonna do that once I break the seal.
It's a way bigger move for Shebs than Tulo.
Let's get it in. You want to get him in Dallas?
I can't break my ink seal. I'm probably not gonna ink till one of my parents dies. I'll ink up for them, even though they don't want me to. But until I break the ink seal, I can't just casually do it. But once I crack that lid, I could see me getting a razor tat somewhere.
I am 100% going to be getting one in Dallas.
I love that. I love that for you.
Now,
have to.
I love it for you guys. I want to move on to this topic.
Okay.
So WWE posted this thing on their Instagram, and I reposted it just to be like, this is upsetting. Okay. And, you know, I just want to talk about it. It is this post right here. Okay. Can you see it in the camera? All right. It's a picture of, that's Logan Paul or Jake Paul. I don't know.
Logan.
This is Logan Paul, Pat McAfee, and Johnny Knoxville. And it says, who are you most excited to see compete at WrestleMania?
No, I saw that post.
And like, man, that is just fucking upsetting. It's like, I have no problem. This is the equivalent of cosplay to me. Like I hate it for the same exact reason, where it's like wrestling being apologetically wrestling, you know, where it's like I have no problem with celebrities being involved in wrestling. As a matter of fact, I love it. I think it's great. I think it's great. Like when the Trump, you know, pre-president Trump. You know, Trump is going to represent a guy, and you have the battle of the billionaires, and it's a hair versus hair match, two like vain billionaires. That's fucking great. You know what I mean? It's perfect wrestling. It's so fun, you know? But it can't be at the expense of the wrestling. You know, this posted, and obviously it's not like the only thing going on. It's like, but these 3 guys who are not wrestlers are all getting matches on WrestleMania, wrestling real professional wrestlers who are trying to build their careers and blah blah blah. And it's like, it makes it's wrestling just trying to be mainstream, which it's just not going to happen in that way. Like WWE, like your wrestlers can go do things, but do you think that at some point that Logan Paul does it, like everyone, the world's gonna be like, oh wow, maybe wrestling is the same thing as movies, or maybe wrestling is Marvel, or like what's the intended impact of it? And my question is, how many more eyes do you get on WrestleMania from these guys? I would love to see a stat of it. Now, you do get good advertising, like, right? Because Knoxville has a lot of followers. Logan Paul has a ton of followers. McAfee has a show. But do you compromise the integrity of an event like WrestleMania? And ultimately, do you make it not? Can you build up to those big, like, Hogan matches and create stars like The Rock when you make the product this too much? I don't know. I guess I'm asking you guys. Because I know I'm smart, so why would I ever like this? Like, why would I ever like this? Especially, and this is the ultimate point I'm making, with the way the storytelling is done. Now, I will give props to the Knoxville Sami Zayn story. If you follow Zayn on Instagram and on social media, he is literally selling the shit out of this Knoxville feud, okay? And it's been going on for like 5 months or something, Obviously, Knoxville doesn't even totally get it. He just thinks it's like a fun thing to do. And I adore Johnny Knoxville, But Pat McAfee literally was just offered a match from Vince. He's like, hey, I want you to compete at WrestleMania as like a novelty, And he's not even that famous. Like no knock on him. And I'm sure he'll do a good job, and I know he has a lot of followers. And I guess you guys have to tell me, Logan Paul obviously has a ton of following. Are his followers like, I gotta see him wrestle?
Maybe. I don't know any Logan Paul fan. I think
because I'm just old, I don't know what a Logan Paul fan is.
I think so. I think that the Paul brothers are known. I wouldn't call them mainstream. They're pretty fringe, right? They're almost in that Barstool world of like, yeah, this is a bad look. Like, I know who's a fan of these guys. It's kind of a certain type of like, it's like a sub Joe Rogan fan. It's not like Joe Rogan fans are at least like older and have a brain. I think Logan and who's the other one? Jake Paul fans are like literal toilet dwelling, like trolley, white, angry, like 20-year-old guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think they have a lot of fans. I don't think they're mainstream. And I think that those people, like you said, it's definitely giving eyes to the product.
See, right? As I'm going, I'm like, all right. I'm trying to give it the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? But I guess there's a part of me that's like, this is also selling out wrestling a little bit.
Yeah, but look, WrestleMania is selling out wrestling. The whole concept of WrestleMania is merging celebrity with wrestling. They had Liberace at the first one, Muhammad Ali at the first one. Not that he always loved wrestling, but you know what I mean? Yeah. It was saying, hey, we're going to make this more than wrestling. We're going to make this a celebrity event to try to make it mainstream. And the birth of WrestleMania is in a lot of ways why WWE became the big thing that it became. And if you want to talk about integrity, what integrity does WWE have at this point? I mean, they threw an event in Saudi Arabia as a journalist was being murdered there for critiquing Saudi Arabia, right? I mean, like, there's no integrity here. This is a money grab, and that's part of the legacy of wrestling.
Right.
Donald Trump is in their Hall of Fame. We know who we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So, like, the mark in me is not sad that they're tarnishing the legacy by trying to grab new eyes with posting on Pat McAfee and Logan Paul and Johnny Knoxville.
My thing is just, I'm saying, how much does this do?
The mark in me is like, they better not fucking let Logan Paul win a match against a real wrestler. Come on. Like, fuck that. And then they get, now I'm a mark. Now they got me. Now I'm a mark, and I'm mad about outcome. So like, whatever they're doing, this is the part. This is wrestling, man. This is wrestling. Like, I'd be cool if Pat McAfee won. They probably won't let him because he's an announcer. Like, he's on the take. I would love it if Johnny Knoxville won. He probably will because it's Sami Zayn.
Right.
I don't want any of these fucking Pauls beating any of my precious wrestlers. Okay. And right there is why they do it, because now people are like, oh, fuck these guys. All right, I'm going to go watch this.
Well,
That's
even the Stone Cold stuff we were talking about, Dan, too. It's like you have
Well,
Stone Cold, and they're not even in a it hit me. I was like watching Raw, and I was like, oh, Seth and KO are having this insane match just to see who can interview Stone Cold at WrestleMania. Like, what are we doing?
Look, my beef with
here?
the Stone Cold thing is my ultimate point to Lo, and it's like, you know, look, am I
can segue to it?
Am I am I excited that Stone Cold's gonna be at WrestleMania, especially because I'm gonna be there, right? Like, I get to see Stone Cold come in Texas. I've seen him enter in AT&T Stadium. It's fucking cool. You know what I mean? People go insane. He's still like the biggest star, you know, in the world. You know, in a world of wrestling, he's still huge. Same thing as The Rock. And I think we probably do see The Rock confront Roman there. I don't think The Rock can stay away from 100,000 people in Roman. Like, I don't think he could stay away. He was there last time. It was in AT&T. That's just my take on that. I think we see The Rock, and I think The Rock will come out maybe after the Roman match and see. I'll see you next year in SoFi. You know what I'm saying? You know, and because why not? I mean, that shit helps wrestling. You know what I mean? That stuff, that's huge, because now you're actually incorporating it into the story. It all makes sense. But so the food, Kevin Owens, I want to give props to Kevin Owens first.
Yeah.
So Kevin Owens is doing he's a great performer. Like, he's doing an amazing job with nothing. Okay.
I always say, if I've said it once, I said it a million times. Yeah. Kevin Owens is a national treasure. The man is so fucking good at this business. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, he's good at this. I mean, if I was Kevin Owens, to be honest, I think a big misfire by Kevin Owens was like not even trying to be in shape for his whole career. Oh, like, it's cute to be like indie for like 2 years, and then now it's like, yo, you're 7 years deep as a WWE superstar. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I would, in my opinion, I'd try something different. Okay, that being said, the story they're giving him, they'll be like, hey, just shit on Texas. That's how you're gonna get Stone Cold pissed off. You know? It's like Stone Cold's that one-dimensional. And then Stone Cold has to like answer his challenge by going like, listen, you awoke something in me that's been dead for 19 years by talking shit about Texas, a place I don't even live. Right? He lives in Los Angeles, okay? We all know his podcast is Broken Skull Ranch is in Agua Dulce. Like, it's out here. You know what I mean? It's not, okay? And so I get it, because he's the Texas rattlesnake. He's associated with that. But it's like, the whole thing is that he is just on the road in different places picking on Texas for no reason. Kevin Owens is just like, yo, at least it's not like that dump Texas. And to Kevin Owens' credit, it was pretty fun and stupid. He was wearing a cowboy hat, whatever. I didn't like it, but I was like, I don't like this, but Kevin Owens having fun. But like, starting a story with Kevin Owens and Stone Cold is so easy and takes a little bit of effort. Set up a Broken Skull Ranch session with Kevin Owens. Oh, Kevin Owens is the next guest, right? And that could be, if Stone Cold's not is busy, he can fly out to the ranch. They do it one day. They have a interview segment, right? And in the interview segment, you slowly build tension between the two of them. Then they talk about the stunner, and it's like, hey, you know, it was fine how you did it. You didn't ask me permission to use the stunner, but it's okay. I'm fine with that, right? And then you have it like get heated, and then we would all be like, that's cool. They're fighting over. It's like the disrespect of not asking for this stuff. Then you get old Kevin Owens back, the guy who stands for fucking nothing. You know what I mean? The guy who came in and decimated Cena. You know. And that's fucking fun. But instead, you have Kevin Owens just being like, doing essentially the George Patterson bit that fucking Armisen did, Governor Patterson, when he was just talking shit about New Jersey. You know? We're just being like, at least it's not that shithole New Jersey.
New Jersey!
And you're like, that's what, so Kevin Owens cuts this promo, and he's like acting the shit out of it. To be honest, like, you should watch Kevin Owens' beginning of Raw, because him and Edge are like both like very talented, you know, very in control performers, you know? And they're doing their best with just nothing. The same thing with Edge and AJ. They're trying to pretend this is a match that we've been waiting for. And I said it a million times. It's a match we'll have. It's a match we're very happy to have. Okay? I'll have it. But it's what I want to say. What dawned on me is that when it really comes down to it, Vince McMahon, as much of a workaholic as he is, the guy, this is the hottest take in the world, he's fucking lazy. You know? That's what I'm going to say about Vince McMahon, is that however he spends his effort and his time, it's not the way that my friends and the people I'm around use their brains creatively, where you overthink something and you're trying to get ahead of an audience. He does none of that. So maybe all day he's working, and I saw him on McAfee, but that shit's a work because he is not working hard enough to make his product quality. If you want to incorporate these celebrities into stuff, you know, make it make sense. Get us into it. The Pauls are like hated guys. So how can you actually bring the visceral hate there into wrestling? Don't just go, oh, Miz, and then they're going to wrestle the Mysterios. It's like for no reason, okay? That's what it is. It's all hodgepodge. McAfee gets a match. Oh, you're going to wrestle? And then, oh, you're just going to talk to wrestle. Who's he wrestling? Austin Theory. And you're just going to have beef. You know, you're just going to yell at each other until the match. And that's ultimately what it is. Even the title unification is nothing. Why are we unifying titles? Would Tony Khan unify titles with no justification?
No.
Like, even the unification of these titles, it's just because these guys both happen to be the champ. That's it. Right?
Yeah, I would have rather seen Pat McAfee wrestle Bad Bunny, you know, like have Bad Bunny come back and just like whatever, let's not have Johnny Knoxville actually wrestle.
Yeah.
Let him be in Ricochet's corner and he does a crazy stunt spot, you know, and it helps Ricochet beat Sammy for the IC title. Like they just throw shit in there and work it out. Like it makes no sense. Who wants to see the Mysterios versus Miz and Logan Paul? No one gives a fuck about that, you know? No one cares about McAfee and Austin Theory. You know, no one cares, like, at all. It's just and even Knoxville. Like, I don't need to see Knoxville wrestle. Like, it's not giving me the reason. The matches I want to see are none of that. I'm like getting into Bianca and fucking Becky. I want to see the other matches, but they don't just. It's lazy, man. This is what it is now, you know? Like, you don't need to watch the show in order to understand what's going on.
Well, don't worry. There's going to be 2 full days of WrestleMania matches. So you'll get plenty good ones and plenty of wastes of your time in there.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all I'm saying is just like, it's just a bummer because they have this amazing event, and I'll argue about the celebrities all day, and you can argue against me that these people, I would love to see some stats that they do bring eyes to the product, and people are like, hey, I'm going to go fly to WrestleMania. They got to sell 200,000 tickets. I'm going to fly there because I want to see a Paul in a wrestling match, okay? I'm sure I'm out of touch in some way, and there are people who do that, okay? You know? Although, I don't understand these Pauls because it's like, I don't really know who they're for or what they're for. Like, I'm very confused by them. I think people want to watch them box because that might be them getting punched in the face, right?
Logan Paul has 22 million followers.
Right.
And Jake Paul, his brother, has 19 million followers.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. Those are a ton of followers.
Those are ungodly numbers. Those are fucking insane.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying there's a good argument against that. A good argument to have them. I get it. I'm not stupid in that. And I see the value in Knoxville. But I just don't understand why we can't work them in any kind of like cool way. You know?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why right now. Because they don't fucking need to do that. They don't need to.
I think they kind of do because I'm interested to see how many seats they sell for the radio. Like,
well, but there's so many problems with that. I don't think it should be 2 days.
Literally, the story is like, it's like I need a match at WrestleMania, but also McIntyre versus like Madcap Moss will get a match. Like, it's like
right.
Going to WrestleMania is also this ridiculous fallacy because you could just grab a match. It seems, you know.
Right. Well, that's a whole another thing. Like, oh, they want to be at WrestleMania so bad, but like also you could just like accidentally argue your way into one. Sure. All I'm saying is that when you're dealing with the Pauls, it'd be great for us real fans to be watching, have something interesting for us about this, and they just haven't put that compelling angle together for us. And so we're just like, what the fuck is this? But they don't. Vince isn't lazy. He's efficient. He's like, I don't need to fucking figure this out. It's done. They're coming. It's fine. That's all I need out of these guys. Got it. On to the next thing. That's what I think is going.
Right.
I just went to Logan Paul's Instagram and he has not one post on anything he's doing in WWE.
Right. Well, but I'm sure he will. Right. At some
He-
point.
He does have on his Twitter, he does, it seems that's where he does most of his WWE stuff.
Okay. All right. And how many followers do you have on
But-
Twitter?
Let me tell you. Hold on one second, sir.
No problem. Here all day.
6.3 million followers.
Okay. Well, still pretty good.
I understand the
Whatever, man.
concept of a draw. It's just like, man, I guess it's just like at the end of the day, it's so frustrating to go into more manias without
Right. Look, it's
caring about
disappointing.
more matches, you know?
It's disappointing.
And that
It's a
being
letdown.
all said, when we went to WrestleMania, like we don't even have like a fun, cool ladder match for the IC title. Like, you know, we don't even have the IC title is kind of irrelevant. They just threw the US title on Finn. It's just, I was really just looking at that clash of the titles picture and it looks really cool. But then you look at the titles and you're like, boy, the titles really, you know, unifying them means nothing. And it's just, it takes
And
so
where-
much
and where-
fun out of wrestling.
And then
How
where
much
do
the
you go
titles
from
don't
there?
matter. You
You're
know?
gonna have to ununify them real quick because like we need 2 champions for the 2 shows. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what their strategy is here, but you know how wrestling works. They
They're-
just do the thing that
Yeah.
makes sense, right? There's no down the road plan. I mean, sometimes there is, not really. It's just like, hey, what would be a cool thing right now? All right, let's just do these 2. And it is cool.
Yeah.
It is cool to have a title unification match. That feels big. It's 2 of the biggest guys in the history of modern wrestling, right? So it's
Yeah.
big. I don't mind it. I just know that I'm like, all right, how many months till they have to have a match to split them? Because they can't do it like that. And look, it's WrestleMania, which some of the WrestleManias we were the least excited about turned out to be the best. Some of the ones that we were the most excited about turned out to be the worst. It's WrestleMania. There's going to be a lot of
Well-
bullshit. It's a slog. You have to go there. It's 7-hour days of just sitting in an arena, watching garbage, and then every once in a while there's something amazing. So we'll see what
Well,
happens.
My intent this WrestleMania was going down there, but I wasn't even going for WWE stuff. You know, like I'm
Right.
there for all the other shows that are going on, and honestly, it's some of the coolest shit that I think is going to be happening in wrestling in a long time. I wish AEW was doing something that weekend instead, and all this
Right.
is revolved around it, but. Because this exists, but I'm not going to be paying for a WrestleMania ticket. If we don't get free tickets, I'm not going to go. I'd rather just go to a bar and watch it. I'm sure there'll be
Right.
someplace showing it, or go to another show that's going on during it.
Yeah, it
that
is
will probably
interesting
have-
because it's like both nights. If both nights are full price, you know what I mean? It's like,
I'm not paying to go to WrestleMania. It ain't happening. Like,
well,
And
we'll
I
see
hear
what
you.
it costs. I
Honestly,
mean, I'll
I
pay. It's just
don't-
the question is, how much are they going to cost for both nights? You know what I'm
well,
saying?
I mean, they're not even selling out the arena, even close to selling out at the arena. So I think it's going to be an all-time.
Right.
Who tell all your friends and family to come, and we'll just give them tickets.
There's a couple tips and tricks. It's always easiest to do it solo. It's tough when you want to sit with 4 people or something like that. But if you just show up to an event that can't get sold out, you'll see people outside. You'll see StubHub tickets prices just sinking. Like if you're cool to miss the first half hour, it'll just sink. You could buy tickets where people have like 1 ticket left and like, I just need to sell this ticket. And they're like, well, I don't want to sell below face. You give it half an hour to the show. They're like, all right, I'll take half. It can be done. It can be done.
All right.
It's not
Anyway,
pretty.
I gotta head out. Good shit, dudes. I mean, we gave. I'm actually proud. I think we did it. We did Scott Hall justice here on this episode today.
We did do him justice. We forgot to mention one thing explicitly,
Do it.
and that he is a 2-time Hall of Famer, which is a
Yes.
very rare thing. He was inducted solo in 2014,
And as the NWO.
and then inducted as a founding member of the NWO in 2020. One of my guys, one of my original guys, one of my main guys, and on my personal Mount Rushmore. And I want to share a quick anecdote, which does not necessarily paint him in a good light. But for me, wrestling is all about respect. So I want to read you. I was reading just a history of his crimes, just because why not? You know, he had a checkered past. He was on the plane ride from hell. Here's something that happened that I want to tell you guys about. Final Scott Hall anecdote. On October 10th, 2008, he was arrested during a roast of the Iron Sheik.
Yeah.
It was in Jersey. There was a comedian at the roast named Jimmy Graham, who I've never heard of. And he made a joke. And he said, after the Sheik, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan got caught snorting coke in the parking lot, his career fell faster than Owen Hart. Okay, that's a joke that this comedian made on stage at the roast of Iron Sheik. Scott Hall charged the stage, knocked that guy on his ass, and grabbed the mic and yelled at him about how that was disrespectful to Owen Hart, who had passed away, obviously. That is respect, baby. That's respect for the business. That's respect for the families that wrestle. And that is a passion for this strange little thing of ours that you need if you're going to be a guy like Scott Hall. Now, I don't know if that paints him in the best light. And I don't know if it's something to brag about. And he did get arrested for it. And he was drunk at the time. Or at least that's what the comedian claimed. But this man loved this business. And the business loved him. And it was all about respect. So much respect to Razor Ramon, to Scott Hall, one of the greats.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Good shit. Come see the show. DZ Does Dallas. Between Bloodsport in the same building as GCW Team Bloodsport and Joey Janela Spring Break on the Thursday night before WrestleMania. And we're going to be hanging out. Come take pictures with us. Come watch the show. It's going to be fun. Going to be funny. And patreon.com/comedians of wrestling. Support the podcast bonus episode after Dynamite this week. We talked no AEW. All AEW talk this week will happen on the bonus episode. Support the pod. And everybody keep watching wrestling. Kisses. Cheers up.